All right, what's going on, everyone? So today we're going to talk about some updates related to the ongoing war in Israel. We've got an increase in strikes being carried out between Hezbollah and the IDF on Israel's northern border. We've got a friendly fire incident in Gaza between two elements of the IDF. Some contentious statements made by Israeli Defense Minister Gallant about the future of Gaza, and then an update on the humanitarian pier that just earlier today was installed off the coast of Gaza. There will be chapters in the description below if you want to bounce from one to the next, and we're going to start with a look at a map. I hope this is helpful, bringing these maps into these videos like this, kind of real-time, zooming in and out. For me, at least, I know sometimes I'm guilty of just starting in the weeds, and I think it's beneficial to a lot of folks, beneficial to me, to be able to kind of come in and out to see where some of these locations are in relation to the rest of the country. Again, I know most of you watching these videos are very familiar with all of these locations between Gaza, the West Bank, across Israel, and in Lebanon, but I think there might be some who are not, and this is helpful. Hopefully, this is helpful to a few of you as well. So starting out, this recent tit for tat really began on May 13th when Israel says that they conducted a strike into southern Lebanon, killing a senior Hezbollah commander by the name of Hussein Ibrahim Maki, who they say was a commander in Hezbollah's Southern Front unit. In response to that, Hezbollah launched as many as 60 rockets across the border into Israeli territory. We do have some footage of interceptions taking place over the last couple days. Again, this has been kind of spiking in the last couple days, so there's quite a bit of footage out there showing some of these Iron Dome interceptions taking place. However, there have been some of these rockets and drones launched by Hezbollah that have struck home against Israeli targets in the north. The area that appears to have been targeted first here was an airbase in the Mount Meron area, which is right in this vicinity here. Zoom in a little bit. So to give you an idea, that's not too awful far from the Lebanese border. And this is an area up here in the north of Israel where so many tens of thousands, I've heard over 100,000 at times, civilians have been evacuated from their homes amidst all of this fighting. There are still a handful of military locations on the Israeli side of the border. Those are largely what are being targeted by Hezbollah at this point, and it seems like this most recent wave of attacks, the focus of those was against a variety of military locations. Now, in response to this, Israel carried out an airstrike into Lebanon to hit the location that was used to launch these rockets into the Meron area. Additionally, they say they struck a couple new sites as well, some belonging to Hezbollah's Radwan force, kind of a special operations force of Hezbollah that specializes in conducting raids and attacks across the border into Israel, as well as a variety of other rocket and missile launch locations in all across southern Lebanon. Hezbollah, then, again, this is the tit for tat, right? One strikes, one responds. Hezbollah, in response to that, supposedly, from their statements, they carried out a strike against the Golani Junction west of Tiberias, around 35 kilometers away from the border shared between Israel and Lebanon. So again, to give you an idea on the map, you've got Lebanon here, Israel here. The strike against Golani Junction was all the way down here, west of Tiberias. That's a significant, again, 35 kilometers. I believe this to be the deepest strike inside of Israeli territory carried out by Hezbollah since this war began. That's notable. So when we use the term escalation on the northern front, it's things like that. The deepest Hezbollah strike inside of Israeli territory can be viewed in this context as some sort of escalation. And that's generally how it was perceived. Overnight, Israel carried out a strike against a missile facility, allegedly a missile facility. I've got some pictures here I'll share that show what appear to be that location in Baalbek. Now, Baalbek, again, zooming out a little bit here to give you an idea of how far inside of Lebanese territory this strike was, it's northeast of Beirut, all the way over here. So Baalbek, and there were some pictures and videos coming out of this showing pretty significant explosions. It's not clear to me if what was struck was a production facility, launch site, storage facility, anything like that. But it's pretty clear something was there to result in that sort of explosion, that sort of fire after the strike took place. Also, very deep inside of Lebanese territory. So again, this tit for tat, a deep strike inside of Israel is met with a deep strike inside of Lebanon. There were more reports, and I'm nervous about getting some of these confused at this point. There were more reports of Hezbollah firing as many as 40 to 60 Katyusha rockets into Israel over the past couple days, but that number has been repeated 2 or 3 times. It's not entirely clear to me if that is 3 separate attacks or 2 or 1 that keeps getting repeated by various media outlets. But if it was 1, that's a significant uptick in the volume of any of these strikes being carried out by Hezbollah. If it's 3, then it's just 3x the uptick in the volume, right? So a little bit of a fog of war there, again, trying to read between the lines between what is being presented by Israel and Hezbollah, and sometimes I think reports are coming in a little bit late and sometimes a little bit mixed. Either way, again, if it was just 1 strike, that's notable, and it may have been as many as 2 or 3. Now, turning back to the situation on the ground in Gaza, Israel continues to prepare forces to push further into Rafah. It sounds like that's really going to be the priority for the IDF in the near term, which shouldn't be a shock to anybody. It also looks an awful lot like they're going to take this piecemeal, one portion of the city at a time, rather than trying to push a large force into the center of Rafah, which is a bit of a different tactic than we saw up north. Not unexpected, though. Militaries learn throughout the course of operations, and it sounds an awful lot like Israel is going to try to do this slowly to kind of ramp up the pressure on Hamas with the hopes that they will be able to secure the release of some of the living hostages still in Hamas captivity. Now, overnight, we got news that 5 Israeli soldiers were killed and another 7 were wounded, including 3 seriously, in a friendly fire incident in the northern portion of the Gaza Strip in Jabalia. They say all of these members belong to the Paratrooper Brigade's 202nd Battalion, and they say that what happened was there were tanks operating alongside infantry in this area, not unusual in this war or any urban conflict. And they say that tank forces arrived in this area of Jabalia in the morning, and several hours later, paratroopers reached this area and established kind of a strong point in a nearby building. Later in that evening, some of the tanks noticed some barrels sticking out of windows and thought that they were enemy combatants. The tanks fired, I think, 2 shells into the building where this group of paratroopers had been holed up and had been set as a strong point for their unit. And at that point, those 2 shells killed, again, 5 Israeli soldiers, wounded 7 more, including 3 seriously. Now, Israel has said this incident is under investigation. We're likely to learn more in the coming days and weeks, but there's a couple pieces to consider here. First off, friendly fire happens in a war zone. It's awful, but it's also very, very hard in an urban environment to always 100% of the time know exactly where all friendly forces are. It takes up so much of your time on the battlefield just knowing where other friendly units are. Like a significant amount of time goes into that, and it's not easy. It's very, very complicated, and every time a unit moves, even from one house to the next, it increases that complexity. So friendly fire is a very real concern for any force, any professional military force operating, especially in urban terrain. The other piece of this, however, is you have to think that maybe the friendly force locations weren't updated, because it doesn't sound like this happened in the heat of a firefight in the middle of a battle. You have to think that there would have been time to run that up the chain and understand where are friendly forces before you open fire. But again, I'm sitting comfortably in my own home. We'll wait for more information to come out on this. I'm not in any position to critique or nitpick the life or death decisions being made by soldiers in the middle of a war zone. Now, we did get some new statements from Israeli Defense Minister Gallant that were rather contentious, and I think are worth running through here because they present kind of a different view of how the war is likely to play out in the near term and what Gaza will look like down the road. In a press statement, he said that Israel's relationship with the United States is essential, strong, and stable. Notable, because you don't hear that from a lot on either side right now. There's so much, I'd say, bad blood between Israel and the United States in a lot of ways right now, whether it's Israel moving forward with the operation in Rafah when the United States administration had kind of asked them not to, whether it's the United States withholding portions of military aid for Israel right as they're kicking off a significant portion of this war into Rafah. There's a lot of tension. So notable, of course, that he kind of makes a way to say in the middle of this speech that that relationship is good. Don't you worry about that. He says, as long as Hamas maintains civil control of the Gaza Strip, it may restore its power. We must eliminate the governing capabilities of Hamas. The key to this is military activity and the establishment of an alternative entity. This is something that from day one has been a conversation, and he gets into this. But it's not just a matter of killing all of Hamas. First off, you're not going to do that. There's always going to be someone that you don't think is a member of one of these organizations, and they are. And just their surviving and existing allows that organization to spring back up in the future. So you cannot kill your way through a terrorist organization. There has to be an alternative that is there to take form. He says, without such an alternative, only two bad alternatives will be left: Hamas rule or an Israeli military rule. And I thought that was really notable, that the Israeli defense minister here is saying, hey, a bad option for Gaza is if Israel is in charge of Gaza, if there's military control of Gaza. That's bad for us. Not just bad for the Palestinian people, it's bad for us. Thought that was important that he decided to bring that up. He said a local Palestinian rule is above all an Israeli interest. Unfortunately, the issue is not brought up for discussion, and no other alternative was brought up for discussion in its place. This is where I'm getting at with the contentious conversation here, the contentious points. That's kind of calling out people inside of the Israeli government, saying, hey, this key aspect of this war, the day after Hamas, we've talked about it on this channel before. What comes then? How are we not putting more time and energy into that? And according to Gallant, that really hasn't gotten the attention that it deserves. He says, quote, a dangerous trend is developing that advances an Israeli military rule in the Gaza Strip. This is dangerous for the state of Israel. An Israeli military rule in Gaza will become Israel's main security effort in the years to come, will cost us in blood and many needless victims, and will also bring a heavy economic price. I will not agree to the establishment of an Israeli military rule in Gaza. Israel must not do this. So this is the head of the military inside of Israel saying, we will not, we cannot. There has to be a better solution than for our military forces to occupy, if you will, Gaza. This has been a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion, a lot of argument, a lot of analysis about what's going to happen after Hamas is eliminated, or at least defeated to the point to where they can't easily rise back up. And this is Gallant stepping right out front and center and putting out a public statement saying, we're going to figure it out. It's not going to be us. The IDF is not going to be the military force responsible for Gaza, which I think is probably the right move. Again, I don't know exactly what the right solution is there, but it's hard to imagine that things get better short and long term if the Israeli military is fully occupying the Gaza Strip. He went on to say that he called on Prime Minister Netanyahu to, quote, make a decision and declare that there will be no Israeli military rule in the Gaza Strip and that an alternative government to Hamas in the Gaza Strip will be advanced immediately. Now, there has been some kind of, pointing the finger right back at Netanyahu, like, hey, you got to figure this out, man. This is no joke. We can't move forward with the perception or the idea that the military is going to do this, which, good. That needs some thought, right? Again, I know people don't always like the comparisons with what's going on in Gaza with what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, but this is one of those things where I think it plays pretty well, right? You could argue that we did a great job moving into, especially the early days of the Iraq War and Afghanistan. The military aspect of that was successful. The military did a good job carrying out their military mission. The aftermath of nation building and helping prop up a government and create a government from scratch, we're not good at that. The military is not good at that. And it shows in a lot of ways, right? So if maybe that's Gallant taking from these recent experiences to say we have to put a lot more attention on the day after and directly pointing at Netanyahu to get that more attention. Then earlier today, we got news from U.S. Central Command that the humanitarian aid pier has been completed and connected to the Gaza Strip. So according to a statement put out by CENTCOM, they say U.S. Central Command personnel supporting the humanitarian mission to deliver additional humanitarian aid to Palestinian civilians in need anchored a temporary pier to the beach in Gaza. As a part of this effort, no U.S. troops entered Gaza. Trucks carrying humanitarian assistance are expected to begin moving ashore in the coming days. The United Nations will receive the aid and coordinate its distribution into Gaza. So it's there. Now, the process for these aid trucks to get into Gaza is a little bit complex. They're going to go to Cyprus, off the coast a little ways. That's where large barges will be loaded with humanitarian aid trucks. believed to be going under some sort of inspection by Israel in Cyprus. They're loaded onto these large barges. Those then move out to this floating dock, if you will, that the U.S. military constructed. From there, the aid trucks and pallets will be offloaded and moved into smaller ships. Those smaller ships will move to this pier that has now been constructed and attached to the Gaza Strip. The trucks will come ashore, and from there, probably inspected again, handed off to the United Nations, and the United Nations will oversee the aid. I do think it's notable that, relatively short statement by U.S. Central Command here, and they made a point that one of those sentences was, as a part of this effort, no U.S. troops entered Gaza. I think that's been a point of conversation for a while now, a point of concern, and we'll see how this plays, but I would not expect that a even temporary presence of U.S. military personnel on that pier are necessary. Once it's been installed, there's no reason for U.S. troops, from my understanding, to be at that pier location at all. They can be a ways off out in the Mediterranean on this floating dock and help to facilitate that, which technically is still within range of some Hezbollah munitions, certainly, but likely out of range from anything that Hamas would be able to do. Whereas that pier, of course, directly connected to the Gaza Strip, is at risk of coming under attack by Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or any other armed groups. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if interested in this or other national security subjects, be sure to check out our Substack, which is linked in the description below. Talk about a variety of subjects there, from Russia, Ukraine, China, Mexico, Myanmar, the future of warfare, AI, all sorts of stuff. I think it's pretty interesting. Of course, if interested, that is linked in the description below. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.